So, there's something wild about hearing someone talk about death with that kind of calm. Like, most people avoid it, right? We joke about it. We distract ourselves. We make light of it because deep down we're terrified of what comes next. But then sometimes you come across someone who talks about it like it's not the end, like it's just another step, another room you walk into. And that hits different. It's like he wasn't scared of dying, man. He was done being scared. He sounded like someone who had already seen both sides of life, the chaos, the struggle, the faith, and finally made peace with it. You could tell he didn't see death as punishment or tragedy. He saw it as this natural transition, like nature taking a breath in and out. That's heavy because most of us, especially in modern times, we act like death is this glitch in the system. Like if we just eat right, take our supplements, meditate, hit the gym, we can somehow outrun it. But he didn't even flinch when talking about it. That kind of peace, it's almost unnerving. It's like watching a man walk straight into the storm, not because he's brave, but because he knows the storm is part of the path. Ta-da! And maybe that's the difference between people who live with faith and those who don't. I'm not even talking religion. I'm talking about that deeper awareness, that stillness inside when you accept that you're not in control. He talked about death like a man who knew his time was written, but didn't resent it. That's what got me. Because we live in a world obsessed with control. Control your body, your image, your destiny, your algorithm. But at the end of the day, we can't even control when we take our last breath. And this guy, he just accepted that. No panic. No, why me? Just calm. Ta-da, it almost makes you think, maybe peace isn't something you find in meditation retreats or self-help books. Maybe peace is when you stop running from what's inevitable. Maybe that's the real freedom. This guy talked about death like someone who had finally stopped pretending he was immortal. And in that surrender, there was something powerful, something that felt more alive than all the noise we fill our lives with. Tadeo, you ever notice how the people who are closest to death sometimes sound the most alive? It's strange, right? You'd think they'd be the ones afraid, grasping onto every second, but it's the opposite. There's this clarity that kicks in when you stop running from the inevitable. Like all the fake stuff, the pride, the ego, the distractions, it just burns away. That's what it felt like with him. When he talked about death, it wasn't from fear. It was from understanding. He didn't see death as something being taken from him. He saw it as something being returned. Like he came from somewhere, he lived his purpose, and now he was just heading home. Ta-da! And man, that mindset, it's rare. Most of us don't live like that. We cling. We try to extend the moment, hold on to things, people. Status? Because we think those things are who we are. But this guy, it's like he detached from all of that. He saw himself not as the body, not even as the name, but as something passing through this world for a reason. You could hear it in his tone, that slow, grounded kind of calm, like a man who had seen through the illusion. Ta-da, he said something like, when you know where you're going, you stop being afraid of the journey. And that's so simple, but it's everything. Because fear comes from not knowing. We don't fear death itself. We fear not knowing what it means. And that's why his peace hit so deep. He wasn't pretending to be fearless. He just knew. You could tell he had thought about it, prayed about it, lived through enough pain and reflection to accept it completely. That kind of peace isn't taught. It's earned. Ta-ta, and maybe that's why it shocks people when someone like him talks that way. Because our culture, especially now, it's built around the idea that death is failure. We hide it, we sanitize it, we avoid it like a taboo. But he treated it like truth, raw and unavoidable. That's the thing about truth. It doesn't care if you're ready. It comes anyway. And he just stood there in front of it, unshaken. Tejo, you know what that reminded me of? It's like watching a fighter who's trained his whole life for one moment. There's no panic when the bell rings, because he's already faced fear 1,000 times in the gym. This man faced death the same way, not with denial, but with discipline. Like he had been preparing for it all along, through every prayer, every hardship, every quiet night alone with his thoughts. And when it finally came, he didn't fight it. He welcomed it. So what really gets me is how calm truth sounds when it comes from someone who's already accepted it. There's no drama, no performance, no trying to convince you. It just lands. You feel it. And that's what it was like when he spoke about death. You could sense it wasn't theory. It was something he had lived with. Like he'd stared at it long enough that it stopped being this terrifying mystery and just became part of the design. That's powerful, man. Most of us never get there. So he talked about life like it was a test of awareness, not success, not fame, not winning, just awareness. Being awake to the fact that every breath you take is borrowed. That kind of humility isn't weakness, it's strength. You could feel that strength in his words, not the loud, aggressive kind that comes from ego, but that quiet, steady kind that comes from truth. He wasn't trying to escape death or deny it. He was trying to understand it. And once he did, it's like he made peace with everything else automatically. You know, when someone reaches that state, it kind of exposes the rest of us. Because we're constantly chasing permanence in a temporary world. We want control, safety, guarantees, things that don't exist. And he's sitting there talking about death like it's the most natural thing in the world. It's like he was saying, you guys are scared of what you're built for. That's deep, man. Because think about it. Every cell in your body knows it's going to die one day, but it still plays its part, still fulfills its purpose. It doesn't panic. It doesn't resist. It just does what it was created to do. And that's what he was teaching without even saying it directly. That peace doesn't come from avoiding death. It comes from understanding your role in the bigger picture. When you stop pretending you're in charge of the timeline, that's when you can finally live. That's the irony, right? The people who fear death the most are the ones who never really live. They plan, they delay, they distract themselves. But this guy, he was present. You could feel it. Every word, every pause had weight. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't trying to sound wise. He just was. It makes you wonder what kind of inner journey he must have gone through to get there. To reach that level of surrender where even the end doesn't scare you anymore. That's not weakness. That's enlightenment. It's like watching someone step beyond human fear into divine trust. Not in a poetic sense, but in a real, raw, unfiltered way. And once you've seen someone talk like that, you can't unsee it. It stays in your head, echoing. What really sticks with me about that kind of mindset is how free it feels. Like, imagine living your whole life trying to control every outcome, your job, your image, your relationships, and then one day realizing that control was never real. Most people would break under that realization, but he didn't. He embraced it. He saw death not as loss, but as liberation from illusion. And when someone reaches that level of acceptance, it changes the entire way they carry themselves. You could see it. He didn't talk with anxiety in his voice, didn't rush to prove anything. It was like his ego had finally gone quiet, and what was left was just clarity. So that's something we don't talk about enough, how peace comes when you stop arguing with reality. Most of our pain isn't from life itself, it's from the resistance. We want permanence where there's change. We want guarantees where there's chance. We want control in a world built on surrender. And this man, he had stopped resisting. He had accepted that he was just passing through, and that realization gave him more peace than a lifetime of chasing success ever could. When he described death, he didn't sound like an ending. It sounded like coming home. And that messes with you because we've all been conditioned to fear that moment. We've built entire industries around avoiding it: medicine, beauty, technology, legacy. But maybe death isn't the enemy. Maybe it's the moment when you finally understand what life was trying to show you all along. He spoke like someone who had already crossed that threshold in his heart long before his body followed. It made me realize how disconnected most of us are from that awareness. We treat death like it's separate from life when it's actually the completion of it. It's like the silence that makes music possible. Without it, the notes wouldn't mean anything. And when he said that, or even implied it through his tone, it was like a reset button for everyone listening. Suddenly, everything we stress about, our routines, our arguments, our insecurities, felt so small. Because in the face of that kind of truth, all the noise falls away. And maybe that's what peace really is. Not an escape, not a reward, but a return to what's real. When you strip away everything temporary, all that's left is truth. He had that look in his eyes, that deep stillness, that quiet understanding that doesn't need to convince or explain. Like someone who finally stopped trying to hold on to the river and just let it flow. That's the kind of energy that doesn't just speak, it teaches. What's wild is how that kind of calm, that surrender, ends up shaking everyone else more than any speech ever could. Because when someone talks about death with peace, it exposes everyone else's fear. You could feel it. The room goes quiet, not because people agree or disagree, but because they feel that truth. It's unsettling, man. It's like watching someone stand at the edge of the abyss and smile. You start questioning everything you've been running from. And that's what makes it powerful. Not the words themselves, but the energy behind them. He wasn't preaching. He wasn't trying to convert or convince. He was simply speaking from a place where fear had already burned away. And once fear's gone, what's left is clarity. That's the part that hits hardest, the realization that most of what we call living is just distraction from facing ourselves. He stripped all that away. There was no noise, no mask, no performance, just a man talking about death like it's not an interruption, but a continuation. It's strange. You'd expect those words to sound dark or heavy, but they didn't. They sounded pure, like truth finally being spoken out loud. Because deep down, we all know it. Every human being feels it somewhere. That this life is temporary, that we're guests here. We just don't want to say it. But when someone says it with peace instead of panic, it hits different. It doesn't scare you. It humbles you. It makes you want to live better. Not in fear, but in awareness. That's what made his words unforgettable. He flipped the narrative. He showed that death isn't something to dread. It's something to prepare for, not through fear, but through understanding. Because when you live right, when you align with truth, when you find peace in who you are and what created you, death stops being this terrifying unknown. It becomes a bridge, just like he said. A bridge from limitation to freedom, from noise to silence, from separation to unity. And maybe that's the lesson buried in all of it, that the goal of life isn't to avoid death, but to be ready for it when it comes. Not because you've given up, but because you've finally understood. He reached that understanding before he left, and you could feel it in every word. No fear, no fight, just peace. The kind that only comes when you've stopped resisting what was always meant to be.